Good afternoon and welcome to Webinar Wednesday. Today we are joined by Ty Greenhall, Industry Principal for Healthcare at Medigate by Clarity, and Justin Hyel, Director Enterprise Risk Management at Baxter International. Webinar Wednesday would like to thank our sponsor, Medigate by Clarity. As the world's most trusted healthcare cybersecurity company, Medigate by Clarity empowers HDOs to comprehensively monitor and manage risk across their healthcare extended Internet of Things environment. Whether it be through a medical device or a building management system, attack surfaces grow as connected assets expand, creating security blind spots that pose risks to availability, integrity, and safety. Clarity tackles these risks to ensure cyber and operational resilience are within your reach. Please visit clarity.com for more information. We want to be up to date on the latest news from the TechNation community. So in the handout section of your webinar dashboard, you'll find a few PDFs, including the pre-show planner for our HTM Mixer in Baltimore this May 11th to the 12th, information on the call for presenters for our October MD Expo in Orlando, details about our HTM Week contest, and your last chance to submit applications for the 2023 class of 40 under 40. The deadline is this Friday, the 28th. Today's webinar is eligible for 1 CE credit from the ACI, so you can obtain your CE certificate by completing the post-webinar survey, which will be emailed 1 hour after the completion of today's webinar. You must complete the survey to receive your 1 CE credit from the ACI, and you'll be able to download the certificate directly from your computer once the survey is submitted. If you have any questions, you can reach us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. Let's kick off today's webinar by giving away one of our Webinar Wednesday t-shirts to the attendee that can tell me the answer to the following trivia question. Today is National Pretzel Day. Which state is the largest producer of pretzels? Answer now using the questions feature on your dashboard, and I'll reveal the answer at the end of the webinar. We'll wrap up today's presentation with a live Q&A, so please submit your questions anytime using the questions feature on the webinar dashboard. As I mentioned earlier, our presenters today are Ty Greenhall and Justin Hyel, and they will be discussing Preventing Cyber Pain in Healthcare, a comprehensive approach to legacy medical technology security. Ty, you may begin whenever you're ready.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. Today's a little different, and I think you can probably see both of us here on the screen together. We typically would not be in the same room doing a webinar together. However, we are in Minneapolis and at a healthcare sector coordinating council all hands meeting being updated. The FDA was updating us, and HHS was updating us, and 405D. So we're going to try to weave some of this information into our presentation. It's this is be very current information. There's a lot going on in the world of healthcare cybersecurity and as related to legacy medical devices or medical device security in general. So we're going to kind of try to weave that in. And as we move through here. Again, my name's Ty Greenhall, Industry Principal, about 30 years of healthcare technology experience. I typically, from my perspective, I find that I'm like weaving the seams of technology and compliance and security and operations together over my career. But delighted to be here at Medigate. What a great company. And but I think everyone would really enjoy, Justin, for you to tell them a little bit about your background and your history.
Absolutely. Yeah, Justin Hyel with Baxter Healthcare. I spent about the last 20 years of my career working in various sectors. Usually I was in a regulatory and compliance agencies, like for CE marking, notified bodies. I did product compliance testing or test anything from wind energy to medical devices for electrical safety. And then eventually worked with a certification organization called UL that started a digital transformation and also came up with a program to test medical devices. One of the first medical device testing programs that was specifically geared for meeting the requirements of FDA. And what the challenge was, a few years ago when FDA was kind of coming back and notified bodies were coming back to medical devices, manufacturers and software developers saying, hey, you need to meet these cybersecurity requirements. And we start to look at those standards and like, well, that's for industrial control equipment. How do we apply that to a medical device? Well, FDA has some guidances, and there's 14 different standards and frameworks out there, and all the confusion that happened in that area. And it was trying to say, hey, here's an approach to take all these disparate ways of looking at cybersecurity, and then apply that to medical device certification. So about a year and a half ago, I moved over to Baxter, and I work with the product security teams. I work with enterprise risk management, with the IT security teams. And a lot of what I do is working with the hospitals, the CISOs, the individuals at the hospitals are doing risk assessments against devices and applications, and then really bringing that back to my company to say, hey, here's some of the forward-looking things that they want to see from us. Here's the things we're doing now, and then really help advance this healthcare ecosystem. So that's kind of my background.
Wow, they're lucky to have you. And we're lucky to have you today too. This is going to be great. He's got a perfect background for the topics we're going to go over. And I am going to go ahead and turn off the camera just because typically you don't have to see two of us in the screen together. And we'll continue on here with the presentation. Let's see, here we go. The agenda, with short agenda, we talk about just what's going on in the industry. What is HIC-MaLTS, and look at the content in HIC-MaLTS and kind of how it applies to what's going on today, and then some questions. So kind of the fear, uncertainty, and doubt start of almost all cybersecurity presentations nowadays is just all the trends are going in the wrong direction. Hacking is increasing. The penalties are increasing for hospitals. The cybersecurity breaches are up. It affects patient safety. It's kind of an interesting industry that it's not just the device or the data, it's actually lives are at stake. A lot of people don't understand that from a cost perspective, healthcare suffers the most as an industry when hit. So if like a bank gets hit, there's certain cost involved for financial, but it's more expensive for hospitals to get hit. And then the DDoS attacks, which are here lately from KillNet, which were really just hitting the internet facing connections and taking down the web access for a hospital. That seems like, oh, well, maybe somebody can't make an appointment or whatnot, but think about the medical devices that actually need to connect out onto the cloud to actually function. So when you start taking down internet access for a hospital, that's a pretty big deal too. And then from a percentage perspective, 24% of all hacks are coming to healthcare. So in the end, the assessment, we're in critical condition. So we need attention on cyber. And as we move through an automation and trying to drive efficiency and sustainability in this market, we're looking to accelerate patient care and increase production and uptime with automation. That then rolls over into connectivity, and we're going to talk a little bit more about connectivity and a cyber physical world. And what's interesting about the cyber physical world, especially with healthcare, is the cyber is reaching out into the physical world and influencing through sensors and actuators, touching and influencing the physical world, whether it be an impulse for a pacemaker to deliver a shock or to not withhold one, or a drip. So there's to deliver medicine. So it's interacting with the physical world, and as you do that, you end up with a whole lot of devices all over the hospital. They're all different types of devices, and we call those the extended Internet of Things, and they're different than the IT devices. And so this is just kind of an important concept to lay down, is that IT devices are different than the other three types of devices, which are building management systems that have HVAC units, elevators, refrigeration units, pneumatic tube systems. the IoMT or medical devices, the Internet of Medical Things, or now the kind of the catchphrase from the FDA is the connected network medical devices. And then the IoT devices could be, soda machine or a alarm system, access control system. But the three in red are different. They have different complexities, different requirements. They speak in different communications protocols on the network, so they don't respond the same way to traditional IT-based security solutions. And so they just kind of, a lot of times they sit out there on the network and you don't really know they're there or what to do with them, and they're harder to manage because you can't use the traditional IT-based software solutions, but you still need that same visibility from a cybersecurity perspective to manage them. You need to know whether the operating system is outdated or not, right? So the requirements are still there, but you just really can't see them. To the point, Ponemon Institute did a study showing that 21%, the respondents felt that 21% of the root cause of cyber attacks were coming from IoT or medical devices, and that there was a 23% uptick in patient mortality because of it. If you look at the other statistics there, just complications and procedures were 37%. So, in the end, you start messing with the technology and restricting it or changing it, you're going to impact patient care, even if it's just degrading it or outcomes are delayed or different. So the Medigate platform, what we're doing is across all those technologies on the bottom of the screen, all the different device types, we are finding them, the device discovery on the network, and then we're doing vulnerability risk management on those devices, helping with network protection, threat detection, the life cycle management, device management, and then operational intelligence. So you're going to see more of kind of how all those things actually play out in trying to manage devices through this new document we're going to review. But first, let's just define what a legacy medical device is. And the IMDRF working group says that medical devices that cannot be reasonably protected against current cybersecurity threats. So that's what a legacy medical device is. And there's kind of two different ways to look at it. With respect to all of our conversations today and this document called HIC-MaLTS, there's an HDO lens and an MDM perspective, so the healthcare delivery organization and the medical device manufacturer. And so, this is kind of what how an HDO might look at it, but then an MDM, they might look at it a little different. So, Justin, I mean, would you say this is accurate, or how do you kind of look at legacy devices?
Yeah, definitely. And the challenge with obviously being a medical device manufacturer is the life cycle and the design life cycle of medical equipment. So as we're working with different technologies and we're upgrading those to supported operating systems, and actually when they were originally designed, the end of life of off-the-shelf software really wasn't sometimes considered at that time. And then as these organizations stopped supporting these, it kind of caught the industry off guard. And now we have devices that the product itself outlives the support of the operating system. And you have fully functional devices, but they're very hard to manage. They're very hard to secure. And so there's a lot of compensating controls that need to happen, or segmentation, or those type of things. So, and that's the other part of the document, is it goes into some of those details. What do you do about that? And we'll discuss that later. But yeah, it definitely aligns with the challenges in the industry.
And so HIC-MaLTS, really, it stands for Healthcare Industry Cybersecurity, Managing Legacy Technology and Security. So this is a document that is meant to be ingested, used. You should see my copy of it. It is totally dog-eared and noted up, but it's designed for HDOs and MDMs by HDOs and MDMs, got together 67 experts across all different types of hospitals and manufacturers, to include the FDA was involved with this as well. And as you go through the document, there's a QR code if you want to actually be taken to the document and start perusing it. but you still have to pay attention to our presentation. But it's got the four core pillars. What is a responsibility transfer network? We'll talk about that. Very extensive section on patching. That is not the panacea that everyone thinks it is. And I think there's like 9 or 11 steps in there, and very, very detailed on what that looks like. And then just kind of overall recommendations and challenges for both HDOs and MDMs. And so as core pillar 3 is cybersecurity risk management, and it breaks it down into kind of considerations from an MDM's perspective, and then we'll talk more about an HDO perspective. But Justin, what as you think about cybersecurity management, as you're creating these devices and then managing them, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, the challenge in the past, or what had happened in the past, kind of the conventional wisdom, is that you design a device, right, for performance in mind, right, reliability in mind. And then as these devices became connected, many of the medical industry said, okay, now we need to address the cybersecurity item, these areas of the product and the features. And in the past, it was kind of a bolt-on, right? And that's really where, you hear all the talk about shift left is we need to incorporate secure by design at the beginning stages of a product development, right? And some of the standards that are out there, obviously 14971 for the risk management process, right? That's not necessarily specific for cybersecurity risks. So then you blend that in with the TIR 57, and that's how you feed your cybersecurity risks back into your risk management process. But then one of the core elements is really understanding your product and what attributes it has and what's at risk, right? You can kind of think of an inside out approach or outside in as well, right? Based on what's out there, what's happening, what can attack my product, what are the entry points, right? And depending on how you approach that, you have to develop a threat model. And those are now required artifacts on submissions, especially with the FDA in those areas. And then the other part is, as products are being developed, you kind of have your way of thinking how a device may be implemented. But as the HDO environments are advancing, they're putting in different technologies, you need to start future-proofing your device to make sure that it can operate in 3 years from now in that planned environment for those healthcare facilities. That's really where things were missed in the past. Is that, okay, here's how we expect it to be connect, but things advance. You change WPA to WPA 2. Now WPA 3 is coming out, right? More secure connectivity. And then the other part too is it was really pushed, a few years ago, and now it's, very documented, is knowing your end of life, end of support, those type of disclosures. That's where the hospitals are saying, hey, you said your device would last for 10 years or 15 years, but you're only supporting it on a cybersecurity side for 10 years. So really what that means is they can plan to say, hey, I need to make additional plans to keep this device on my network for another 5 years. And how you manage that is really discussed in this document, right? Or do you need to put that in your procurement plans to say, all right, in 10 years, we need to plan to replace these devices because we know they won't be supported for the next 5 years, even though they still function.
Yeah, excellent. And a lot of our clients at that point, what they're doing is they're taking a look at what are the controls that I'm going to need? What are the risks to that particular device? Can I mitigate them? And the document actually goes into how to use a device like Medigate and decide whether or not you want to keep a device. So in this core pillar 3 still, they have something called the responsibility transfer framework, and you can find that on page 43 through 50. But the whole idea is at that point, you really kind of have your options where, okay, the hardware is supported and the software is not, or the software is supported and the hardware is not, or both aren't supported. And so as you look at that, what's the process you need to go through to determine whether or not you want to replace the device, keep it, put network segmentation around, or some other controls. So there's a whole process that is suggested in this document to assume the risk if you're going to continue to move forward with it and not replace it. And so as the HDO is considering this, one of the concepts that they have, we have in this document, I was fortunate enough to be on the development group, the passive network monitoring is what it's coined as, and you are observing, the passive network monitoring is like a Medigate tool. And it's one of the things we do where we're observing the network traffic, the packets of information that are traveling across the network, reading them, understanding them, and understanding what the devices are on the network that are sending it, all of the data about the device, but being able to then see abnormal behavior, but know a lot about the device so that you can make decisions on what the risks are and what the vulnerabilities are. So it also says here a little something about the SBOM and the MDS2. We're going to talk more about that a little bit later. And with respect to that, as far as outlining in the document, here are all of the different topics within the HIC-MaLTS publication that refer back to a passive network monitoring tool like Medigate, and the functionality that you can gain from a tool like Medigate in managing your legacy devices. So you'll have a chance to download or email me if you want a copy of this presentation at the end. You'll get my email address because there's a lot of great information like this right here as we break down the document. Here, all of the questions that it answers, these are just some of them, but we're going to go through more. But how are you determining whether something's legacy? Talking about the acquisition process. How does acquisition relate to legacy if that's supposed to be the old devices, and contracts? I mean, that sounds like it's more upfront, right? It's you're why are you taking care of legacy questions while you're buying the document, or you're buying the device now? Anything jump out here on this screen for you, Justin?
Yeah, and that's the thing that still comes up because as medical device manufacturers design their next release of a product, I mean, it could take 3, 4, 5 years sometimes, and the current device now maybe have an unsupported operating system because it's been in the market for a while. So that still comes up. There are some hard stops with some healthcare delivery organizations now, but other ones know that certain technologies are pretty novel and the redesign is coming up, but they still need these devices. So that's where the contract language has to be, modified, because meeting multi-factor authentication and some of the things that they request for some of the newer devices, or that this brings that into play on how to negotiate those contracts too.
Yes, there's a link in the document for a whole nother contracts called model contracts, medical device cybersecurity within the document. So you make sure you look for that. I think there's 52 clauses which have been pre-negotiated. So again, there's just so much information here, and I got to shout out to Samantha Jocks from McLaren, and Mike Powers from Intermountain, and Jessica Wilkerson from the FDA, who really is just a labor of love for years to get this thing done, but really a lot of great information in it. So again, considerations from a cyber risk perspective, the stages of life cycle. And so we go into a number of different, a lot of detail, but when I went through this, I saw this product assessment, and it reminded me of a presentation I did with Mayo Clinic at HIMSS. And so I thought I would just kind of run through this real quick as the kind of prior to a purchase. And these are kind of the document goes through the idea here and how you can use a Medigate tool or passive network monitoring tool in the intake process, the procurement process. So if somebody asks for a device, you need to do a risk assessment on it. And so first we want to break it down into like, is this a new device with unknown risk, a repeat purchase with unknown risk, or a repeat purchase with known risk, or no security assessment required? Because you really only want to worry about the ones with unknown risk. And then you tell the person, yes, we're gonna go ahead and get that for you, and or look at it. And the first thing you do is go back to the vendor and you say, I need some additional information because I'm going to do an assessment. You ask for the MDS2, the SBOM, enterprise architecture diagram, and you kind of get into the whole. Let's really start pulling apart this and seeing more about the document or the device and whether or not we want to buy it from a cybersecurity perspective. In our system, you're able to say, hey, look, without any mitigations at all, it's got a high risk score. But if we put in network segmentation, or we put in some controls, we're going to be able to lower the risk score. You see that in the Medigate product, and so you can say, well, okay, well, yeah, we can go ahead and move forward. And now you know what mitigations that you want to put in place when you onboard the document. So as you take that data in, you're calculating your key metrics, and you decide whether you want to buy the device or not, which leads into, okay, now that we've got them, how do we prevent them from becoming legacy? And again, a lot of different options here to consider, and doing that, and keeping up with the patching process, which I know is again, it's protracted for our environment. It's not like IT devices where you have Patch Tuesday and you just upload them. Can you talk a little bit about anything here?
Yeah. And the big challenge in the medical device industry is a lot of times you need to pull these off a floor that are actively being used 24/7, and you may need to take those off the environment, disrupt clinical workflow, to be able to upgrade, update, and patch devices. And so you really need to look at what their availability is. It's not like you said, if the device wasn't designed for firmware over-the-air updates, right, you have to take these things offline. And then coordinating that, and based on the schedules, sometimes you get pushback that, hey, I have a patch available now, and we have to wait for the next PM cycle, the product maintenance cycle, which may happen in a couple months. So that's just one of the areas in healthcare why there are significant delays as well. The other thing with patches is on the medical, the manufacturers and software developers perspective, there may be a lot more verification and validation because when we release something, we need to make sure it doesn't affect patient safety in those areas. It doesn't necessarily mean we have to do a full FDA submission at that time, but we do need to make sure we verify and validate our updates, upgrades, and patches. And that adds more of that into that turnaround time on those, which is why hospitals will need some way of addressing compensating controls or something in their network to protect these devices during that interim.
Yeah, which is again one of the areas where the document refers over to a passive network monitoring solution like Medigate, where maybe you put in network segmentation to say let's restrict this device in its communications because we know it's got vulnerabilities, and we're kind of waiting for the patches, which would be the remediation. But in the interim, we need to be able to look at the device, see what it should communicate with, define what the access control list would be in the network, and then provide it to the network software so that it can lock it down, kind of least privileges type of concept, until we can get it to get it patched. So again, really better together story. There's so many better together stories here with our technologies, and more references for questions that everyone seems to always have. And as you look at, how do I support my customers and extending the life of these of these devices, and whether you're breaking it into connectivity or third-party component risk management or inventory and asset management, the publication really goes into rubber meets the road type of considerations in helping you to extend out the life of the devices. Yeah, anything on this particular page that jumps out at you?
Yeah, there's like 2 points in here that really jump out, is obviously SBOMs. That's kind of the big initiatives nowadays, and some of the requirements and the new regulations. And that's really holding, manufacturers accountable, right? To understanding their products, what's in the products, what are the dependencies in those products. And if you know that, you're able to correlate that with the new vulnerabilities and threats out there to be able to address those and triage those areas, right? And develop patches, right? And develop those updates. And that's kind of a challenge in the industry. You get a lot of R&D teams working on products, and then now they're working on their next release, but then they have to still support the current release, and really going back to look at our processes, right? Look internally and saying, hey, is there something we need to do? Do we need to break off, after release support versus traditional R&D, right? It's a whole nother subset of that, and to make sure effectively plan and have the staff to do those. And the other part is understanding the benefits and risks of third-party components, right? It's not only software, right? You could have modules that maybe end of support for part of your supply chain in the next 3 to 5 years, right? You need to plan for that. Are you going to replace those products? Are you going to do something else to make sure you can manage those? Are you going to pay for extra after support packages with these third parties? So it's a very holistic approach on the supply chain and what the capabilities as well technologies are, and what you can do to future-proof those devices. Maybe the technologies have real estate that you can add on additional features, higher level cryptographic algorithms in those. Maybe in the legacy designs, they didn't have that real estate, right? They didn't have that memory. And to be able to say, hey, you know what? When we build a product, we better have some extra, processing power for the future.
Yeah, you're spot on. The 4 pillars: governance, connectivity, cyber risk management, and future-proofing.
Mm-hmm.
So in the document, it's even got a little bit of that in there. I'm gonna talking to the inventory and asset management. What a lot of people don't understand, but we find with our clients, is when they put in this mitigate, and they've got the, some people call it passive monitoring, but here in the document they do. Other people call it automated discovery and security. There's different terms for it, but basically our ability to go out, and we're doing something called deep packet inspection, where the packets over the network, like the video earlier with the cars that are going by on the freeway, where some of our competition will see a white Ford. We see a white Ford F-250 2018 with 4-wheel drive. We see so much more detail because we do something called deep packet inspection. But in that, we're reading the packets and we see utilization data. And so what happens inevitably with all of our clients is they start looking at the utilization data on the assets and say, why am I running my business this way? Why do I have, platinum level service contracts for when I could really get by with bronze on these? Or why don't I, my utilization is down for these 3 devices. Why don't I go ahead and only and get rid of one of them and sunset one, now that instead of at the point of end of life, instead of doing the responsibility transfer, I'm going to take 2 and I'm going to upgrade them and go to newer devices. And so it's the same cash flow. And so there's just all sorts of ways to look at your data and your devices differently, running your business differently. And hands down, almost every client we have gets to that point once they start seeing the data. It's just it's a natural progression. So asset management is another really good one. Now this one would definitely speak to you, design and deploy and maintain. And so, can you tell us a little bit about what are your thoughts and now is you're designing devices with cybersecurity in mind?
Yeah, so some of the things I covered earlier, but you really look at the operating system, right? Are we beholden to someone else on how they're managing that software, how long they're going to support that software, how long are they going to have extended support, or is that extended support limited? And as we start to develop our new products, we're actually looking to have more control over that, right? How do we build that code? How can we make sure that we can continually on our own manage that platform? And also you look at modularity, right? Is there a way that if this, Wi-Fi module in, 5 years may not be supported, is there a way we can upgrade those type of things? Are they serviceable? The other things that we're doing too is, we're looking at some of our novel technologies to make sure there's mutual authentication built into those, right? PKIs. We're looking at, hey, let's incorporate WPA3 and TLS 1.3 and some of the FIPS 140-3 advanced algorithms, right? Kind of limit those out. So when healthcare facilities are ready to deploy it in that way, we can meet them where they're at instead of taking a device and having to say, okay, now we need another upgrade in this to make it meet your requirements. So there's some of the things that we're considering right now, and even some of our newer product release, we've tried to future-proof those, right? And when the hospitals are ready, we can turn those on.
That's awesome. And protecting legacy devices. So as you're going through and you're trying to figure out, okay, so we've got these legacy devices, and now, how much risk can I handle? Kind of going into a model and what the criteria is for risk tolerance. That's early in the document, and then how am I going to manage those? Again, just a ton of information here in this particular document. So I wanted to flip a little bit and talk, kind of relate this back to the big picture on what's going on in the industry right now. And so we're going to start at the top with the White House and the National Cybersecurity Strategy that's out. Now, there are 5 pillars in the National Cybersecurity Strategy. And the first one is defending critical infrastructure, which healthcare is one of the 16 critical infrastructures, kind of public-private, in our country, and really I think one of the top 3 from the White House's perspective as to importance in maintaining it. But within all of the critical infrastructures, we're looking at minimum security requirements. And here it's for healthcare, they're talking about minimum medical device cybersecurity requirements. Pillar 2 is disrupting and dismantling threat actors, and Genesis is a platform where it's a marketplace where the bad guys sell data, and that was just recently taken down. And the Hive is a ransomware group responsible for $100 million worth of ransomware in healthcare that was taken down in January. So the FBI, the DOJ, and in this particular instance, there were some foreign countries that jumped in the support. That's really more pillar 5. But then pillar 3 is driving security and resilience to shape market forces, and we're going to talk more about that on how they're shifting liability and grants. 4 is workforce development and vulnerability reduction. So there's a knowledge, there's an understanding that we don't have enough people out there to really do everything that needs to be done to secure all of the different industries for for cybersecurity. And again, remember, this White House strategy is for all critical infrastructures, but we can relate it a little bit to healthcare here. But then forge international partnerships. Really, that kind of goes back with Pillar 2, where they went and got the bad guys with other countries. But if you think about focusing on Pillar 1, here's a recent strategy statement from the Biden administration to secure healthcare sector and medical devices against cybersecurity attacks in 2023, working closely with Health and Human Services to develop minimum standards for cybersecurity. Remember, I said that Justin and I are here with HHS and the FDA here at a meeting in Minneapolis. Definitely a topic of conversation here on what those minimum standards, how do we arrive at them? Well, and one of the documents that continues to come up as a discussion in what are the minimum medical device cybersecurity standards, what could they be? There is a new document that was an upgrade to a document that was just released last week. It's like, what day is it? It's all kind of blended together.
Already the Wednesday.
Yeah, it's like we were at HIMSS last week. It was released, and it's you can see here the top 5 threats. One of them is medical devices, and the top mitigations. There's a whole section on medical device cybersecurity, and that QR code will take you to more information on the medical device cybersecurity component. And then as you drill down into what that looks like in the document, here are the points, the areas that it addresses. First thing I'll say is it says to understand your inventory, to get an inventory, you need asset discovery and a security solution. Same thing as a passive monitoring solution that's mentioned in HIC-MaLTS. It's the ability to go out, see the devices on the network, understand what they're doing, understand what they're talking to, and so you can't manage what you can't see. That's kind of just sounds real basic, right? And then integrating it in with the CMMS, hopefully to operationalize it, because you need to do this at scale. And then you got endpoint detection, vulnerability management, clinical workflow baselines, understanding the communications. And so there's a number of different things here that are recommended. So there's another document you can go and it describes the processes that go along with some of the recommendations in HIC-MaLTS. So the two go very nicely together. And as we then go to number 3, the shaping market forces, this really is where it comes back to the first place I would say for healthcare is the omnibus bill. And Justin, can you talk to us a little bit about what your understanding of this bill is and how it affects medical device manufacturers?
Yeah, and especially the first point is, who can best manage these devices, right? The companies that have designed, developed, and architected a device is most capable of managing the updates, the upgrades, and the patches, right? And so that's one of the big areas. And it's going back to the shared responsibility of an ecosystem, right? It's almost like putting something on a cloud hosted environment, right? Who's responsible for what? Can I be responsible for physical security in the AWS zone? No, but that's what we've agreed upon, that they're going to manage that part. But I'm going to manage my application. I'm going to manage my identity access management. I'm going to put my cybersecurity tools on that to manage those areas. So that's a responsibility I'm taking on. And yeah, one of the other areas too is you think about, definitely the patching, the updating, lifecycle management. But then the other area is you almost think of continuous monitoring and continuous verification, right? That's going to be the big challenge, right? How do we get visibility and insights to our supply chain and get that information, right? And I think it has a lot to do about transparency, and part of that is the SBOM, right? If somebody is given the SBOM, they can correlate that. is probably going to have a lot of false positives, right? That's going to be the challenge in the industry, but that needs to be normalized with, the risk management process or a VEX file or something like that to say, hey, of these 500, there's only 5 that really apply to this device. And by the way, there's the criticality of those.
Can you explain just a little bit for everybody? A lot of people don't even know how to spell VEX, let alone what it is. I'm not sure you got to go into a lot of detail.
Well, the high layman's terms is when you correlate your software bill of materials with the vulnerabilities out there, you could have a lot of identified vulnerabilities, and then based on how the device is designed, architected, deployed, and sometimes what services you're running on that, a lot of them may not be applicable. And based on the device's architecture, a higher CVSS score of say 8, 9 could be correlated temporally down to maybe a 5 or a 3 based on the layers that would need to get through to affect that area. So it's basically normalizing what vulnerabilities out there and how it really could affect that product.
Right. So as they get the SBOM, sometime they would be able to tell this one is more vulnerable than this one over here, or I don't even need to worry about this SBOM because it doesn't contain the section of code in this particular upgrade.
Yep.
So yeah, super. Absolutely. So the one thing that I would say also is kind of thinking this out is that so as the medical device manufacturers are generating the SBOM, you kind of take this to its natural process. It needs to be exchanged, and then it needs to be consumed or ingested into something at a hospital so that it can be correlated to an asset, which is where Medigate comes in. Just like we're taking the MDS2 files in and attaching them to an asset, we will be taking a SBOM in and attaching it to an asset. So therefore, and we'll talk more about the SBOM here in just a second, but just thought it was a good place to kind of flow that out. But so the software bill of materials, for those who haven't been exposed to it, it's the section 3305 in the omnibus bill, and there's a little snippet of it, but talks about how to provide the secretary with a software bill of materials. And as you can see, just here's just some basic data points that will be contained, but it's a lot of people describe it as like ingredients in in food. You need to know what's in it, so you can tell whether or not there are vulnerabilities in, say, Bob's browser or Carol's compression engine, so that when your vulnerability or malware comes out, you're going to be able to look at an asset, drill down into the components, and tell whether or not you've got an issue. And then the VEX, whether or not that, while it even has Carol's compression engine, the VEX will tell you whether that version of Carol's compression engine is the one that's going to give you a headache or not. And so again, when you think about the SBOM, again, there's different perspectives from an HDO's perspective versus an MDM's perspective. But I think in this document, in HIC-MaLTS, it does a really great job of trying to put forward best practices. I mean, they don't exist yet, right? Not everybody's doing them, but I think if we all aspire to what the best practices would be in communications, establishing good communications up front. What does that look like? What is the responsibility of an MDM's side of communications and an HDO? HDO's got, responsibilities like, what do they always say? Takes two people to communicate, right? You've got, if you both have to try in a relationship. And then just the challenges and recommendations, several pages there on those for an SBOM.
Yeah, that's a big topic too, of how do you be more proactive, right? How do you be more proactive with communications? between device manufacturers and healthcare facilities. That's one of the things we really need to advance.
Yeah, and you know, it's a lot of new ground here, and that's what's I think to be applauded here, is that the industry is moving forward, and not unwillingly. I mean, I think we all aspire to the same goals, so it's really just working through the pillar 3 here. Other component is the grants, and so you can see here the rest of that statement I put up earlier is considering federal grants for hospitals to adopt certain minimum cyber requirements for medical devices. What this means, we don't know. Even in this week's meeting, you know, we don't know. Just that there is an appetite across all departments, all agencies, all parties to fix this problem, address the problems that we're having for cybersecurity, you know, continually getting hit with ransomware, impacting patient safety. We need to get a hold of this and stop it. And if grants are the way to do this, or subsidies, or whatever's going to make sense, help. I would say help is on the way. If there's nothing else that I got out of this last couple of days, is everybody's got their shoulder into pushing or pulling, you know, to really find solutions to the problems that we're facing. Would you agree?
Yeah, I definitely agree to that. I mean, they talk about cost, right? What is the cost of implementing or deploying something? What's the cost of a hospital to upgrade their systems, right? So that they can accept these connected devices securely or at the level that they want. And yeah, we've actually, as a company, done some walkthroughs, right, of VA facilities, and say, hey, you've got all this technology, you're only using part of it, but if you integrate it this way with more of these advanced integrations, right? Now look at your clinical efficiencies, your workflows, the ability to support these products, right? The ability for us to help you support these products, right? How can we open up those avenues?
So again, just, you know, Medigate helps out in the device discovery across all of the different device types, and for different functions necessary in managing the procurement of devices and legacy devices and all other devices throughout the entire lifecycle management for risk, for vulnerabilities. It's best in class 3 years in a row. So kind of with the summary, we've got the government is actively increasing their focus in this area. Legacy devices are going to remain a challenge. It's just, you know, it's something we have to come together and work towards. And you know, so we're very grateful for the partnership with Baxter and being able to work together in you know, using our visibility and automating cyber functions with Baxter and their work in the secure designs, compliance, and being very proactive in trying to work with clients and address the problems, as Justin has said. And then if you're looking for the minimum practices out there, I would say that you know, the HIC-UP, we call it HIC-UP Healthcare Industry Cybersecurity Practices, HIC-UP 23. Please go ahead and you know, take a look at those. So again, all these are hyperlinked. So if you send me an email, I'm going to give you my email here in just a second. I'll give you a copy of the presentation, but all these are great. It takes you right to the HIC-MaLTS document. Amy just wrote an article on the document, so it's a nice summary. More information on the Healthcare Sector Coordinating Council, who put out this publication. The Joint Security Plan, which is more of a manufacturer's perspective on building cybersecurity into a device. Senator Warner, he's got 17 policies out there, which will give you a good feel for what kind of changes are being considered in the industry right now across the government. the White House National Strategy. We talked about those 5 pillars, HIC-UP, and then there's a whole new guide on how to implement technology into healthcare, kind of with the National Institute of Standards and Technology Cybersecurity Framework as a guide. So, and also, I know that both Justin and I would love to have you follow us on LinkedIn. I mean, I know that I try not to put out a bunch of junk so that I'm just like killing people with advertisements or anything. Really just try to say the good stuff, you know, the new documents that are coming out and whatnot. Yeah, so I don't know, Justin, do you have any last words, or you want to take questions? What do you want to do?
Yeah, I think we should. We only have a few minutes left. Always have last words, but I think we should hold this off for to see what we can answer during this short time.
Super.
Okay, great, thanks. We've got time for a couple of questions. One question is, what department should be in charge of medical device cybersecurity at an HDO?
Wow, that's a...
Well, what we've typically seen, and responsible is a broad term, right?
Yeah.
There's many areas of responsibility. How it was in the past is, you know, a biomed team, maybe a little bit of the clinical operations, but they're trying to do the clinical workflow and patient outcomes. And then as we've seen things evolve, especially with platforms like Medigate, that visibility has been rising up through more of the IT leadership side of those HDOs. And some even have just dedicated teams, right? That's what they deal. That's what they do. They'll take our devices, even if we filled out all the questionnaires, and they'll test them, right? They'll put them on test networks. They'll do their own penetration testing, assessments, come back to us with what they've seen. So it depends. And then the small to medium size, maybe there's, you know, they're just relying on the medical manufacturer to really help them through everything. I don't know if you have any comments on that.
I would agree with everything you're saying. It's seems to be, you know, different for every hospital. You've seen one hospital, and everybody's doing things a little differently. But I do see that this is an opportunity for clinical engineering and information security and IT and procurement to really come together and kind of break down silos and start working together. Although we do have there's another document, in case you have an insomnia problem and just really need things to read late at night. You may not, you know, be excited about reading it, but it's a really great read. It's called the Healthcare Resiliency Landscape Analysis, which is just it's on the 405D website as well. If you look for landscape analysis 405D, or send me an email if you want a copy of that document. It's a lot of statistics that we just gathered and published, and one of the statistics showed that if information security is kind of put over, it tends to have a higher correlation to the NIST cybersecurity framework. So, but typically we like to see everybody involved and everybody working together, because there's benefits for every department.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the initial deployment, right? You're working with one set of team and possibly some overlap with another. But then when we're trying to work with a healthcare facility and we say, hey, we have a new patch, we need to deploy this, we need to work together and get this done. If it's going to the wrong stakeholder, you know, that's what we really need, is that higher level of communication internally, that when we're staged and ready for something, that it goes to that right stakeholder that can make that happen.
And so pillar number 2, which is communications, and Justin was saying earlier, it's so important to establish communications in the beginning of a relationship and define, you know, who you talking to when. So I think that it goes to that point within the document too.
Okay, that's great, guys. We've come up to our hour, so we'll have to wrap up now. So thank you, Ty and Justin, for your time today and for a great and informative presentation. I'd like to encourage everyone to visit today's sponsor to learn more about the products they provide for our industry. So please visit clarity.com. And as promised, the answer to today's trivia question is Pennsylvania. So congratulations to our winner, Adam Unsworth. Just a quick reminder, you can obtain your CE certificate by completing the post-webinar survey, which will be emailed 1 hour after the completion of today's webinar. Now, you must complete the survey to receive your 1 CE credit from the ACI, and you'll be able to download the certificate directly from your computer once you've submitted the survey. If you have any questions, you can reach us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. We'll be back next week with another webinar, so please visit webinarwednesday.live for more details and complimentary registration. Thank you once again for your time today and hope you enjoy the rest of your day.